Oh, that Kevin Feige definitely knew what he was doing from Phase 1 all the way to the ending of Phase 3. So let's talk about how he was the one that had to fight against Disney and the decision to name the films Avengers Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2, and why they listened to him and it paid off. So, before we get into this, remember, this film was going to be part of that phase. It was going to be between two of the films. And the films were Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2. And it was weird when they announced that, because the moment you announce Part 1 and Part 2, you're directly telling the people that this is more or less the same film, but the break is in the middle, something big happens. You know, we've seen this before, and that's just kind of how it works. And unfortunately, this can affect the reception of the film when it comes to critics and the box office. Now, Marvel Studios was forward thinking thanks to Kevin Feige. So originally when this decision was made, he was not directly involved. It was more Ike Perlmutter who was calling out many of the shots before Kevin Feige stepped in, that he had the decision to call it Part 1 and Part 2, mainly due to some of the other franchises like, you know, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Pirates at one point. So they were looking at it going, well, what do we do with this and how can we proceed? Kevin Feige was the one that stepped over Ike Perlmutter and was like, look, I don't want to work with this guy. He's making wrong decisions. We can't call it that. The two films are completely separate. Yes, they carry the same story through them, but the two films are nothing alike. They're more disconnected than any of the other films that are Part 1 and Part 2, so we're not going to do that. So he was the one that came up with the idea of calling it Infinity War and then Endgame, because it was two completely different styles, two completely different films with different themes and different characters. And again, if you look at them, it made sense, and ultimately Kevin's decision was the one that drove them to be the biggest films in box office, specifically Endgame. So they did the right thing, and this is honestly probably the best case scenario of what could have happened if they would have called it Part 1 and Part 2. People would have went into the first one knowing that it's a cliffhanger, and there is that, you know, amount of people that would have said, well, I guess I'll just wait till it's out and I'll see you before the next one, because that is a mentality. That is what happens. You guys probably have somebody in your life that says that, you know, they're like, oh, I could just start, you know, watching the new season of something. And they're like, you know what, I won't. I'll just wait till it's all done and binge it at once. That does happen. That can happen with films too, and it's a proven track record. If you just look at stats, films that are pitched like that, Part 1 and Part 2, they don't do as good generally. So the decision was changed and, well, it benefited them.